Hello, welcome back to another episode of Fantasy Football by Committee. I am not Zach Brunner. I am Bruner. I get his name fucked up all the time. 2.0. Anyways, it's me. I'm here with Luke, our fearless leader. Maybe he has fears. We don't know. Is out today sick, but we still show must go on. So Luke, how are you doing today?
Good, Trevor. I'm here, and I'm sad Zach's not on. He's in the comments, but I wanted to tell you guys that we kind of have a little bit of a shorter show today. We're doing the AFC West. You guys know us. We've been doing fantasy football, breaking down each division for the last couple of weeks. We're splitting the AFC West up into two days, today and tomorrow. We're doing Chiefs and Chargers today. So Trevor, to fill a little extra time, I wanted to tell you that on Friday night, I bought a pint of bubblegum ice cream, pink bubblegum ice cream.
One scoop is too much. I think a pint is just overkill at that point. But
What What's nice
whatever
about
makes you happy, whatever makes
what's
you happy. Speaking of what makes me
yeah,
happy, at
yep,
least, it's the Kansas City Chiefs.
yep.
They're one of the two teams we'll cover today, along with the Chargers. Obviously, the Chiefs are the better team. Do you think that necessarily means that they are a better fantasy hotbed than the Chargers? I would say.
Well, it's gonna be, and here comes Zach in the YouTube chat. I'm gonna puke. I think that's due to my bubblegum ice cream. I like to think it's due to Trevor's shaky internet, but I think it's due to my bubblegum ice cream. But Trevor, it's really interesting with these two teams, isn't it? Like, obviously, the Chiefs are the better team, and that's been proven over the last couple of years. But I don't know about you. It feels like that it almost feels like the Chargers have not a lot, but more fantasy relevant guys this year, right? Than the Chiefs.
To me, it does, just because I think the receiving room is more defined, I would say. But obviously, the opportunities are in Kansas City too. But before we dive into it, hey, we got storms. We're gonna try to keep going, but hey, we'll see what happens. But
We'll get
but
through
we'll
it.
dive straight into the Chiefs.
If I
I
have,
mean,
if I have to do this podcast by myself, I will.
that's all we need to hear.
Yeah.
So without getting too crazy with it, we'll dive into the Chiefs. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he's their quarterback. Really not much to be said about him as a player, obviously. But he's being drafted ADP at about QB1. That's 21st overall. He also had 7 top 5 weeks last year, including every week from week 7 to week 11, obviously with that week 8 bye. So the question obviously isn't going to be Patrick Mahomes. Is he a good quarterback to have? Is he elite? That's garbage. We don't need to ask that question. But the question that we often ask with quarterbacks is going to be, in my opinion, is he um, is he good enough to be drafted 21st overall for you?
So I think we've really kind of hammered this down over the last couple of weeks, right? It's always kind of a high risk, high reward to take a quarterback early. It really feels like, and Trevor, I know you're on this train. I know you. I mean, ever since we've known each other, you've always been the kind of guy to take, start with two running backs, or maybe get an absolute stud wide receiver and get an RB1 coming around. I still think I like that strategy here. 21 feels a little high from Patrick Mahomes because, just talking in logical fantasy football terms, how many more points is Patrick Mahomes going to get you than, like a Trevor Lawrence, who's going, much later, sixth, seventh, eighth round. I don't know that it's that big of a difference. So if you're putting a gun to my head and saying, are you taking Patrick Mahomes at 21? I think I'm passing. I think there's other guys that you can build your team around that'll probably benefit you in the end, where you can pick up someone like a Trevor Lawrence, or even like a Kirk Cousins or Jared Goff much later in the draft. And of course, the points aren't going to be the same, but I mean it's somewhat more comparable to doing that as opposed to taking like Jonathan Taylor compared to like a Tyler Algier, right?
Yeah, and 3 quarterbacks are right now ADP in the top 30. Mahomes at 21, Allen 23, Hurts 26. I mean, then to your point, you can waiting on Burrow gets you to 36 at a draft
Right.
position. Justin Fields, he's 54. Kirk Cousins, like you mentioned, he's there at 98. Jared Goff, even 121, quarterback 16. So there definitely is a place to sit and wait. And obviously, like you said, I'm a waiting guy.
And just even off of that, and I know like taking Burrow in the third round is still probably somewhat of a reach, right? But I think you can even make the argument you'd rather have Burrow in the third than Mahomes in the second, right?
Yeah, I would take that argument. I mean, obviously, you look at the production and Patrick Mahomes was quarterback one last year, 428. Josh Allen was next with 412. You look at Joe Burrow, he was 4,369. That's a whole 60 points. But to your point, on a weekly basis, that's less than 4 points per week.
Right.
Are you going to lose many battles because your quarterback is scoring four less points? Probably not. Are you going to lose battles because your RB2 is uh, AJ Dillon, probably.
Right. Yep. Yep. So I,
So that oh,
I think I'm sorry to cut you off. I think we're both in the mindset that we would love to have Patrick Mahomes on our team, right? It's always fun having the best player in football on your team, but at that price, it might be a little too steep. Obviously, it's always, of course, depending on what your draft board is looking like. But I think there's much more value at 21 than Patrick Mahomes right now.
yeah, and obviously if you're a super flex league, best ball stuff like that, that changes. But at least for what we're doing here, PPR redraft,
Half point PPR redraft.
not not the move. So moving on to running backs, we got Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon, Deneric Price. That's kind of the running back room. Pacheco right now RB 29, McKinnon RB 44. That is good for 77th and 125th overall, and Deneric Price is pretty much going undrafted there. Luke, you had Jerick McKinnon a lot on your teams last year. Obviously, Pacheco's a hot pick. Looked good in the playoffs. Looked good coming on late. Hard runner, but is he worth it at RB 29? Are you looking at McKinnon instead, or maybe do you want both of them?
And I'm sorry, Trevor. I don't know if you have this or not. Do you have where Pacheco's going?
77th overall.
Okay, so okay, so right around end of the seventh, start of the eighth round, somewhere in there.
Mhm.
My whole thing on Isaiah Pacheco, and Zach, you're in the comments. Please give your opinion as well. I'm not in the mindset that Isaiah Pacheco is the best running back of all time. I'm not in the mindset that he's even a great running back. I think Isaiah Pacheco's value probably comes from the value of how good Kansas City's offense is. Comes from Andy Reid. Comes from Patrick Mahomes. Comes from Travis Kelce, kind of exploiting that middle a little bit. The thing about Pacheco is it really feels like he's going to be on the field this year. I don't want to call him a three down back, which he probably isn't. But in the playoffs, he showed he got those goal line carries. He got within the 20. I mean, Kansas City, it feels like every single drive they're probably going to be within the 20. I think you can. I think you can do much worse than Isaiah Pacheco in that eighth round. I think he's definitely a starter. I would love him as, I would absolutely love him if I could get him as a flex in all my leagues. He's more of an RB2 to me, but he's an RB2 that'll be involved. What that means in this Kansas City offense, I don't necessarily know to the highest degree, but we've seen what Clyde has done. We've seen we've seen. I mean, even I know they weren't anything special, but like Le'Veon Bell and LaShawn McCoy, they made somewhat of a name there. I think Kansas City is just their offense is good enough where it can support a running back. And I think Isaiah Pacheco is probably good enough to make to be somewhat fantasy relevant in this offense. I don't think Patrick Mahomes' arm should scare you off. I don't think Andy Reid's play calling should scare you off. I think Pacheco's fine. And here's Zach in the chat. Pacheco's a one cut hard runner, which isn't an elite skill set, and Price can easily do the same exact role, which probably diminishes Pacheco's value. And I 100% agree with Zach. So maybe eighth round you're reaching, and I'm sure people are going to be reaching on Pacheco, right, because of how good Kansas City is. I think you let the people reach, and if he's there and top of your board and you don't know what else, I'm fine with taking Pacheco. But if you're looking to reach on him, I'm advising against that.
Yeah. I'm a little different. I'm kind of a sucker for Pacheco. I feel like people like me who may have drafted him in Dynasty. It feels a little different when you draft guys in Dynasty and you draft him as a rookie and you see him become something. Obviously, you kind of have to put those feelings aside for redraft. But we saw him run hard. I think the only problem is obviously you look at McKinnon in the last 5 weeks of the season. Two RB1 finishes. He had an RB6, RB17, and the 19th in there. When you look at Pacheco, he was solid, he was consistent, but he had only one top 15 finish He only had one outside of the top 30 in the last 7 or 8 weeks, but he's not really the boomer bust last year. So to Zach's point, to your point, if Price can do much of the same thing, if he can come in, be an impact player, it's hard to see his value go up.
I
And,
I
and
I agree, Trevor. And just to speak on Jerick McKinnon real quick, um, just to speak on Jerick McKinnon, like you said, two RB1 finishes. I can't imagine Jerick McKinnon gets two RB1 finishes this year. Can you? I mean, like it just feels like those numbers aren't sustainable. Like he's going to be involved. Like he'll be fine, but I don't necessarily know that he's a guy that you need to have on your team this year.
yeah, I don't see it either. And the thing with McKinnon that's interesting is you look, obviously Pacheco was good down the stretch. A lot of people loved him, and he was solid down the stretch. But again, the last 5 weeks he was just as good as Pacheco, if not better. Throughout the entire season, he was used, whereas Pacheco was really only down the end of the season, minus week one. Obviously, some of that is him due to being a rookie, but clearly the Chiefs like what they have in McKinnon. They're probably going to like what they have in Price. So this comes a little different. So, speaking on McKinnon here, we have Pacheco at RB29, McKinnon at 44. Again, that's a difference between pick number 77 and 125. Are you taking McKinnon over Pacheco? Do you like McKinnon overall? What are your thoughts more specifically on McKinnon and what he can bring to your fantasy team?
Yeah, if you're making me decide between the two, I think I like McKinnon a little bit more. I think Pacheco produces more than McKinnon this year, but in terms of value, I think McKinnon there provides a little bit more. Pacheco, like I said, to me, Pacheco, like at times it seems, and I guess like this whole Kansas City offense is kind of revamped a little bit, but I still don't see Pacheco being a 1, 2, maybe not even a third option on this offense, right? And I think you need to be in that group in order to kind of support RB2 numbers. I think McKinnon has obviously carved out a role, right? That they won a Super Bowl with him in this role. I don't know why they would go away from it. I don't think they will go from away. They will go from away with it, and I don't think they should go from away from it. I think Jerick McKinnon's fine. Like I said, I don't know that he produces the same number he did last year, but I like his value more at that spot than I do Pacheco at his spot.
So now I will ask, I'll give you the guys around their ADP and see if that changes anything. Around, obviously, Pacheco 77, 73 to 76 is Mike Evans, Goddard, Brown, Marquise Brown, and Javonte Williams. Right after him, Darren Waller, Traylon Burks, James Cook, Kadarius Toney. Then if you look at McKinnon, who's down at 125, the guys around him, 122, the San Francisco defense, Devin A-Chain, Jacoby Myers, Gino, Anthony Richardson, Sky Moore. Does that change your thing at all? Does that solidify McKinnon as the option here?
Well, I don't think it changes at all, right? If cause like McKinnon's going to play, he's going to produce, he's going to score you points on your fantasy team. If you can get that where a defense is going, I'm all for that.
Yeah, I'd be in the same place too. I don't know why my screen is frozen right now, especially looking like an idiot. But yeah, I'm a McKinnon guy as well. And we
We
will just, I
we
mean,
got.
we're at
I'm sorry. Before we move on, we have Zach in the chat. The Kansas City running back needs to be valuable, and it's hard to trust any of them to do that consistently. And Zach, you're 100% right about that. It's hard to really trust anyone in this in this Kansas City offense that isn't Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce, and it all makes sense. So like I totally understand if people are if people are off of this Kansas City offense. If people are off, everyone but Travis Kelce, it makes total sense. I think there's value to be found in this Kansas City offense. But I don't know that I'm willing to risk an eighth round pick on Isaiah Pacheco when you can get McKinnon that much later.
And to Zach, I was trying to refresh my page. Give me some time here. Shout out to the Milwaukee Wi-Fi.
Hey,
But
we only have two teams today, so
yeah, yeah.
we'll be good.
Also, I know the chat went away, so I can't see anything since it came back in. But shout out, thank you, Randy. I appreciate you. I think you're a great guy to or gal or hey, we don't judge here. But
Shout,
besides
shout
the
out shout out D Zellner. I was just at the bar with him. He wanted to leave a comment saying Matt Stafford's a fifth best quarterback. We had this conversation probably
I
20 years
don't
ago.
I don't know in what world, in what division, and what criterion,
Let,
but we'll see how he comes back from his injuries. I mean, he did have a lot of injuries last year.
yep.
But I don't know if you covered it. Generic Prince, actually, I apologize if I mispronounced his name. He's going undrafted. Do you see him as a possibility of a guy kind of shooting up draft boards, becoming drafted, or do you think he's one of those guys that kind of just stays out of the draft boards, don't even have to think about him in the draft?
I would say probably right. Anyone with the Kansas City, anyone part of Kansas City is probably going to be on someone's fantasy radar, right? If you watch football, which makes total sense. I don't necessarily know that you need to draft Prince. I think it's another situation where keep an eye on him. If you're in a deep draft, absolutely pick him up because the Kansas City running back room is just so unpredictable to me. Like I said before, the Kansas City offense is just really unpredictable to me. Of course, it's worth having Kansas City players on your team. I don't. It's just really hard for me right now to say, yeah, I'm going to start Prince this week. I'm going to start Prince that week. But I mean, if you're someone who's rolling with Kansas City, I'm all in on putting a bench spot on Prince, and kind of watching him through the end of the offseason and then the early couple weeks. If something doesn't work out, drop him. Cool. But I don't hate picking him up with your last pick or even grabbing him on the waiver wires right after the draft.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat too. I don't see a point. I don't think many people are going to be talking about him. To be honest, I didn't really even think about him until about the last week or so. When you dive deeper into depth charts, you don't really see that kind of stuff. But with that being said, we'll move on to wide receivers. The big wide receiver and one that Zach feels very strongly with his just overmounting love for is Kadarius Toney. But in all seriousness, um, Zach told us and he said offline, only thing about Kansas City is that he doesn't think there will be any consistency among Kansas City wide receivers. People are saying Tony is the guy because Kansas City didn't invest in receivers, but they drafted Rice in the second round.
Right.
So do you agree with the people saying that, hey, Tony's their guy now, you went on the Tony hype, or are you more of it's going to be more like kind of what we saw last year with their wide receiver room?
Yeah, well, if anyone knows me, they know that I'm a huge Kadarius Toney fan. I mean, he's probably a top five player in terms of electricity with the ball in his hand, right? And we kind of saw that in the Super Bowl last year, somewhat in the playoffs. But I guess just to kind of, and I'll speak on Kadarius Toney, but just kind of group Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, Rashee Rice, and I guess Marquez Valdez-Scantling too. Like Zach said, it's just way too much inconsistency for me to, to I don't want to say waste, but to take a draft pick on him where I need that player to produce. I think you said Kadarius Toney's kind of going right around that Isaiah Pacheco range, that eighth round. Um, to me, with an eighth round pick, you're looking at someone who can probably contend for a flex every single week. And I don't necessarily know that Kadarius Toney's your guy. Of course, you're going to get some weeks where you get 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, but you're also getting weeks where you're getting one catch for 3 yards and no touchdowns. I don't love playing that game in redraft. Nobody loves playing that game in redraft leagues. And that kind of turns me off of Kadarius Toney. I do think that I do think that Kadarius Toney's probably in a really good spot with Andy Reid in terms of play calling and all the weird shit that they do. He feels like a top end gadget player almost, right? Who can kind of do a little bit of everything. I just don't love that as a fantasy manager. You need a consistent role. You need someone who's going to get at least 5 receptions a game, and I just don't see that out of Kadarius Toney. Here's Zach's in the chat saying, people are saying Kadarius Toney's wide receiver one when he's right. In reality, Travis Kelce is the wide receiver one. People got to stop thinking of Travis Kelce like a tight end. I mean, he's a wide receiver, really. You're going to get him in the tight end spot, and that's always going to be Mahomes' go-to number one guy. Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Mahomes, Travis Kelce. I don't necessarily know how many touchdowns Kadarius Toney scores this year. I'm guessing, I'll probably take his under of whatever the line's at. And then I don't necessarily know that the consistent yards. I mean, yards are going to be there. Are they going to be there consistently? Probably not. And that's saying a lot coming from a guy who loves Kadarius Toney, probably a top 5 player in the league for me, favorite.
Yeah, and I'm just looking up George Pickens' stats right now because Kadarius Toney going around the 81 mark at ADP. Right behind him at 82 is George Pickens, Dak Prescott, AJ Dillon, Alvin Kamara. You got Jahan Dotson down there, Brandon Cooks at 89, Cortland Sutton at 90, Gabe Davis at 91. So there are some wide receivers there. And obviously, to your point, we don't know what we're really going to get with them. Pickens in his rookie year with no offensive line and a rookie quarterback, um, 39 in PPR, 31 in standard. So
Right.
seeing him go right after Kadarius Toney, the same Kadarius Toney who, granted, did have injury concerns, but only had 3 weeks in the top 30, only 3 weeks in the top 45 last year. Seems a little interesting.
Yep. Yep.
So he's obviously wide receiver one in terms of Kansas City, kind of what they think is going to happen in terms of ADP, stuff like that. Wide receiver two, now he's a guy we know a decent amount about. Wide receiver 78 overall, 205 in the draft. That is Marquez Valdez Scantling. Finishes wide receiver 54 last year, only missed the 1 week, obviously due to bye. Had no great games in terms of inside the top 20, but he did have 2 games inside the top 30, a couple scattered around in the 40 mark. So seeing him at wide receiver 78, do you think there's optimism that he can do the same thing and easily beat the ADP, or do you think he'll be more close to that wide receiver 78 benchmark this year?
So so everyone, I'll start this off by saying everyone tune into Lombardi Sweep during the season. We Trevor, Zach, and I, and Janet, we talk about Packers football. We talked a lot about Marquez Valdez-Scantling on there. I will say that I like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I've always kind of been in his camp. I had him on a lot of teams last year, and to me, it feels like Marquez Valdez-Scantling is just kind of, I don't want to call him a decoy because he is used, but it almost feels like he's that field stretcher to open up that Travis Kelce over the middle, to open up that Juju over the middle last year, to open up that Jerick McKinnon underneath last year. And once again, they won a Super Bowl doing that. I wouldn't see why they would go away from that. Wide receiver 78 probably feels that Marquez Valdez-Scantling can beat that, right? Especially on the best offense in the NFL. But I don't necessarily know that he sees wide receiver, even like wide receiver 70 numbers. I don't think that Marquez Valdez-Scantling is a guy you want on your team. I don't think he's a guy you're ever going to start. Is he a bench guy? If someone like Travis Kelce gets hurt, maybe. But even that, I don't know that the consistency is there. I don't think I'm touching Marquez Valdez-Scantling this year. And that's coming from a guy who loves seeing fast guys just run down the field and guys bomb it to him. Like I said, I think his role in this offense is kind of just to run straight. It's kind of to hit those post routes. And here's Zach in the chat saying, teams don't let the Chiefs beat them over the top, and that's kind of what Marquez Valdez-Scantling. That's what his NFL career is: beating teams over the top. So I think I'm off of Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Will he finish that wide receiver 78? Probably. It would be hard for me to say that he doesn't, but I don't think that wide receiver 78 gives any value in fantasy football.
Yeah, and I'm always a sucker for a good deal. Obviously, finished as wide receiver 54 last year, drafted a wide receiver 78, but his finishes, I mean, even some of the better ones, 40, 20, 24, 22, 38. Like, the question I'd ask is he a guy that you can start with any confidence?
Right.
I'd say no. And I don't think even best ball, he doesn't have boom weeks.
Right.
So I look at him and I think he'll be much better in the wide receiver 78. But to your point, do you really want him on your team? I mean, there would have to be a heck of a lot of injuries for him to start. And if he's starting, your season's pretty much already done anyways.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I'm just trying to think of it right now. There's no week that I'm thinking like, yes, I need to start MVS this week.
And clearly, the ADP is saying no. Everybody else thinks the same way. He's being drafted overall at 205. Obviously, like I said, wide receiver 78, 199. Tyler Bass, 200. Mac Jones, Isaiah Hodgins. Right after him, the New York Jets defense. Jaden Reed, from Green Bay at 207. That tells you a lot right there from that third round rookie. And New Orleans Saints at 205. So clearly, not a lot of love for MVS this season.
Right.
So another third receiver, excuse me, that will go to Sky Moore. Obviously, he's got the name, he's got the flashes. He's a great player. We've talked about him since he was drafted there. We wanted to possibly see him in Green Bay. Didn't happen. He's in Kansas City. Had a very up and down year last year. Not that he wasn't active; he was only out 2 weeks, but up and down in terms of his wide receiver finishes. 86 up to 118, down to 67, 103, got down to 33, and then 2 weeks later, 108. So my question for you was Sky Moore wide receiver 54 or 128th overall. Is he like MVS with you, in which you don't want him on the team because you can't trust him? Or is this a guy in his second season that you look at with Andy Reid and says, now with Juju out, he can make some things happen?
So to me, it kind of feels like a little bit in between, right? It feels like Sky Moore is almost like, of course he's not a pawn or a toy or anything, but he's Andy. It feels like he's Andy Reid's pawn. Like we saw Sky Moore line up all over the field last year. He's lining up in the backfield in the playoffs. Like there's a reason they drafted him. There's a reason they're going to use him. It kind of feels it kind of feels like he will be used a little bit less than Kadarius Toney for me, but a little bit more than Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And even still, I don't think that's enough to be fantasy relevant. Trevor, do you have the guys that are going around him right now?
Yep. 124, Jacoby Myers, Jerick McKinnon, Geno Smith, Anthony Richardson. Then we have Sky Moore, and then after him, Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, Tyler Boyd, Dante Foreman.
Yeah, so that's not necessarily the most eye-popping group of receivers or of players there. Sky Moore is going to be involved. What that means, I don't know. I'm thinking somewhere, along the lines of probably like 650 yards and maybe 3 touchdowns this year. Like if you're in a deep league, I'm not going to tell you to reach on him, but you do much worse than him. In a regular redraft league, like I said, I just don't love any of these receivers to make a championship impact in your team. And I think Sky Moore kind of falls into that. I think you might be able to get better value out of. I don't even know. Maybe out of Darnell. I don't know. And like I'm saying, I don't know. That leads me to believe that I don't want to trust him. I don't really want him on my team. I think there are big weeks to come out of Sky Moore, but I don't know, Trevor. Do you see him being a 100-yard and a touchdown guy on a week to week basis, or even on a 1 out of every 4 week basis?
No.
Right.
And for me, I mean, you look at the guys around him. I've always been high on him. We've always really been high on him. But 131, Tyler Boyd. He finished in the top 35 receivers, I want to say, last year. Higgins or Chase goes down, that skyrockets. So you got him there. Zay Jones, Jacksonville. Obviously, Calvin Ridley's coming back, but again, he showed a lot of chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. That offense is getting better in a bad division. So like Sky Moore can do some things, but I think there's a lot more clear path for production from a Boyd, from a Zay Jones, than from a Sky Moore at wide receiver 54 there.
Right, and I just want to reemphasize that. Like, I totally agree with you that like a Zay Jones, if a Calvin Ridley goes down, or a Christian Kirk goes down, or a Tyler Boyd, if Jamar Chase or T Higgins goes down, is probably much more valuable than a Sky Moore if Kadarius Toney or MVS goes down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the last wide receiver to talk about here, wide receiver 4, we're going to call him. Second round pick this year, Rashee Rice. So to all those saying Kansas City didn't invest in wide receiver, they lost Juju, but clearly used a second round pick on him. Currently going as wide receiver 66. That is 169 overall in terms of the guys he is being drafted around, starting at 164. DJ Chark, Michael Gallup, Tyjae Spears, Jordan Love, Jeff Wilson, Rashee Rice, Irv Smith Jr., Jonathan Mingo, Pickett, Hunter Renfrow. What do you think about the ADP, and do you want him, I guess?
I'm sorry, can you tell me where he's going again?
He is going 169 as his ADP, wide receiver 66.
Okay, so basically undrafted, right? Uh, like you said, there's a reason they drafted him in the second round. Kansas City's not drafting receivers just to say, "Oh, we're not going to use." Like Andy Reid is going to use probably every skill player he has on his team, and that's what makes me kind of like him a little bit. I like Rashee Rice much more than I like MVS. I would say I like him probably the same as Sky Moore. It feels like to me, Rashee Rice and Sky Moore are still, and even Kadarius Toney, they're both question marks. They both really, like, what is this player on this Kansas City offense? I think if you can pick Rashee Rice up with your last pick, I say go for it. Like, there's a reason they drafted him. I'm sure there's a reason that they're probably going to use him if they drafted him. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's a Kansas City player. Like, fine to have a Kansas City player on your roster. I'm not actively searching out to reach on Rashee Rice. He's another guy where if you can get him with your last pick, yeah, I'm all for it. Otherwise, if you can pick him up right away on the waiver wire, cool. Then I think you're doing well. We talk about on the show a lot of, like, don't draft a kicker, don't draft a defense right away if you're drafting a little bit early, and kind of watch how the offseason goes. I can kind of see that a little bit with this Kansas City offense. If you draft like an MVS and a Rashee Rice or even a Sky Moore, and just kind of play it out if you have an early draft, that's kind of in the mindset I'm here. I'm not expecting Rashee Rice to come out and have 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns or anything. To be honest, I'm not really expecting him to come out and have 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. But could I be wrong on that? Of course. To me, Rashee Rice is kind of a 450-yard guy, 4 touchdowns, who maybe turns it on at the end of the season. I think Rashee Rice is probably more of a late season pickup. But if you want to waste a bench spot, on him for the whole season, go ahead. I'm not going to be the guy to tell you to do that. I'm not going to be the guy to do that. But I mean, there's an argument for it.
Yeah, I'd agree too. I just, with this offense, I think I could definitely see why. Second round pick, Andy Reid offense, that's great. But at the same time, um, I mean, it's tough for rookie receivers to get involved in a lot of places, especially a room like Kansas City.
Especially in the best
Um,
offense in the NFL.
yeah, I mean, I'm hands off, a lot of mouths to feed. We know Mahomes will be able to get it to anybody as long as they can somewhat get open, and that's a lot of receivers,
Right.
although they might not be fantasy relevant. So now we're going to go to the real wide receiver one. Travis Kelce, tight end one last year, top 5 11 times. Difference between him and Andrews, 100 points. That
Yeah,
was the
crazy.
difference between
Crazy.
Saquon Barkley and Devin Singletary, who were
Crazy.
running backs 5 and 23. So clearly, huge gap between him, and that is partially why Travis Kelce right now is being drafted 6th overall, which is just insane for a tight end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, he was being drafted earlier last year, but again, 4 and 5 are Ekeler and Cup, 7 and 8 are Tyreek Hill, Bijan Robinson. So seeing Kelce, seeing how good he was, pretty much automatic weeks 1 through 12, top 5. Um, is 6 too high for him, or is really there no limit to how high you're going to draft him?
Well, I was gonna say, to be honest, you I think you can justify taking Travis Kelce any of the first round spots, and that includes the number 1 overall pick. I think Travis Kelce, and I'm the biggest Rob Gronkowski guy you'll ever find. I think Travis Kelce kind of builds that tight end role a little bit more than Rob Gronkowski did. Right, when Rob Gronkowski was playing, there was always that, oh, Antonio Brown's in the league, or oh, Julio Jones, whatever. I think Travis Kelce, in regards to fantasy football, he gets yards, he gets touchdowns, he gets receptions, he gets everything. Randy's right; he's the best tight end in the league right now. And I think he's the best tight end in the league by a very wide margin. I don't know that at any other position that there's as big of a margin. Maybe a kicker. I don't know. But like, Travis Kelce is a guy that I think you can take in any of the spots and feel comfortable with taking him. You're gonna get 1,300 yards and at least 13 touchdowns. And you can't say that about a lot of wide receivers. You can't say that about a lot of running backs. You can say that about Travis Kelce. He's the number 1 option. Zach alluded to it before. He's the number 1 option in this offense. He's Mahomes' number 1 guy. Mahomes and Kelce are one of the best duos in NFL history, and I don't see why that diminishes this year. Everyone's like, "Oh, Travis Kelce's getting old." What the fuck ever? He's not getting old. He's fine for right now. If you want to win a championship, I think you can do much worse at the 6th spot than Travis Kelce. I think you do much worse at the 5th spot than Travis Kelce. I think you do much worse at the 4th spot than Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce is probably a top 6 player in fantasy football. And I think if you have that sixth pick, he should probably be right at the top of your radar.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to go for him. I mean, you look at his PPR finishes, he's been number one since 2016, outside of number two in 2021. So, I mean, clearly you talked about his age. He's been in the league 10 years. He's still only 33.
Right,
By all means, it's nothing crazy either. He doesn't take a lot of huge hits. I feel like Gronk took a lot more in his prime. And to your point about him being drafted, I mean, number four is Austin Ekeler. We know his injury problems. Number seven is Tyreek Hill. Again, if Tua goes down, that he's still a good player, but that looks different. Diggs is at nine. Barkley's at 10. Who knows if he even has a contract? So,
right.
where I would usually say tight ends don't ever deserve to go in the first round, I'm hard pressed to believe he isn't a late first round talent here.
Right. And Randy, you're in the chat. Randy's in the chat here. Travis will go high, probably 5 or 6. Randy, let me ask you: Will Travis Kelce? Would you take him if you had the number 4 overall pick? And we can we can move on and talk about while Randy forms his answer. But I think it's really it's really an argument that you can make that Travis Kelce can go any of the top 6 spots in this draft, and I think you can justify it.
So with those pass catchers kind of covered, obviously other receivers on the team, they got Richie James, Justin Ross, Justin Watson. I feel like it's a pretty even question across the board. Any of them even worthy of rostering, or
No,
maybe looking at?
no, I think they're all worth keeping an eye on to kind of see who emerges, but I don't think it's anyone you need to be searching and reaching for at all.
So with that being the Chiefs wrapped up, best value on the Chiefs for you?
Probably Jerick McKinnon, right? You know, I think the Chiefs, the good players are going to go very early, and people are going to reach on the rest. And I don't know why that changes this year. The only one that kind of sticks out where you can get value is Jerick McKinnon to me. So I'll go Jerick McKinnon.
I'm going to go a little outside the box. I'm going to say Kelce, only in that obviously his ADP is 6, so it's hard to say there's much value there. But I think there are going to be a lot of leagues with a lot of people who don't want to draft a tight end, who may look at the age thing like you did. I think there are going to be a decent amount of drafts where he falls early second round. I think that's a tremendous steal. To your point, I think
Yep.
you're 100% correct. He can be the fourth best player in this draft easily.
Yep. Totally agree.
So
And
that's it.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
go on.
Before we go to the Chargers too, I do have a little segue here. D Zellner, who is in the chat, Zach saying Justin Ross will be fine if he stays healthy, and I don't disagree with that. D Zellner is in the chat. He was that this is who I was having the conversation with. I told him that Justin Herbert was a top 5 quarterback, and he told me that Matt Stafford's a better quarterback than Justin Herbert. And I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
Currently, or like at their peaks?
Right now, best quarterbacks in the NFL.
I know Zach's not going to like this. I think right now it has to be Herbert, but I don't think it's a discussion because, I mean, last time we saw Matt Stafford, he was playing with half an arm.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's saying much. But I think if they're both healthy, I might lean Matt Stafford. But
Okay.
I think it's closer than people are thinking.
Sure. All right. That was for Dave. Love you, Dave. Thanks for being in the chat. Thanks for having that conversation at the bar earlier.
So speaking of Herbert, he's going as quarterback 6, 49th overall. Last year, quarterback 11, top 10 quarterback 7 times. When you look at him, obviously the guys he's going around, that's big at every position. 49th overall is an interesting position here, kind of odd placement. Dalvin Cook and J.K. Dobbins are immediately ahead of him. Immediately after him, Jerry Jeudy and Damian Pierce. So obviously some big question marks there, some good players there. Godwin and Kittle right below that. Fields at 54. Is this a good place to take Herbert? A little high, little low?
I have
Where do you stand?
I have to do better on my listening. What pick did you say he's going at?
He is going at ADP 49, quarterback 6.
I think I like Justin Fields a little bit more, especially with Damian Pierce right there. We're all high on Damian Pierce. I'm very high on Damian Pierce. I'd rather have Damian Pierce than Justin Herbert. But if you're drafting Justin Herbert there, I don't think you're mad by any stretch of the means, right? Justin Herbert has what, I think he's at least he did have the record for most yards and touchdowns at his age in NFL history. Like the dude puts up stats, the dude puts up numbers. The only reason he was shitty last year, he had that rib injury. Sounds like everything should be good this year. Justin Herbert's a tough son of a bitch. I imagine he plays every game that he can. I don't think you need to worry about Justin Herbert's injury concerns. I think Justin Herbert is a 4,000 yard, 35 plus touchdown guy. And I think that's totally justifiable to take him, at where he's going right now.
Yeah, and I mean, for people that maybe aren't thinking to taking Herbert there, I think there's a point to be made. I mean, if you don't believe in Justin Fields at ADP, 54, the next quarterback is Trevor Lawrence at 64. I'm not saying that's a bad option, but there are certainly some fantasy players out there that want a top tier quarterback to root for. And I'm not saying there's a drop off, but there is a lot of positions between Herbert and the next quarterback. And then obviously, if you lose Lawrence, then it falls even more. So I can see it there. I'm not going after him, but we will see overall, I guess.
To me, Justin Herbert's kind of in a spot where if you draft him there, cool. You're fine. Could I get someone else? Yes, and I would love someone else. But if I have to take Herbert there, I'm cool.
How much do you think the offensive system impacts him, whether it makes him more positive or negative, going from Joe Lombardi to Kellen Moore?
So to me, Justin Herbert is the he's the franchise piece, right? He's the guy that we're building the team around. I think that I don't want to say offensive coordinator proof, but really he's kind of offensive coordinator proof. I think whatever they're going to do, they're going to tailor it to Justin Herbert. I'm not. And like I said, Zach, please chime in terms of offensive systems. Kellen Moore is not the greatest play caller of all time. He's not really the greatest offensive guru of all time, but you have to have Justin Herbert throwing the ball in order for this Chargers team to win. And I think Kellen Moore is smart enough to know that. And as a fantasy manager, I'm smart enough to know that he has to throw the ball to win. So, take Justin Herbert. Cool. I'm with it. I totally understand if you take him. I understand if you don't take him.
Yeah, I think I'm in a weird boat of I think it helps him a little bit. I'm not super. I mean, I didn't like watching Chargers games at all, mostly because their head coach is an idiot, Brandon Staley. I don't like him at all. And obviously we know Kellen Moore, the offense that he likes to run. He's done it in Dallas a lot, but I think there is something to be said about running a new offense with older players or players that are there that there may be a couple wrinkles that he tries out with the Chargers that teams haven't seen before, at least early on, that can get him some higher finishes. Zach said, even though he sucks, he'll be an upgrade. Lots of inefficient passing incoming. And that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is if it's inefficient passing, they probably got to pass a little more, I guess.
That's what I was going to say. If it's inefficient passing, at least it's passing.
And to Randy, I'm guessing Aaron Rodgers goes higher than he did last year. With Hard Knocks going to the Jets,
he will.
Probably. It definitely will. So that's a quarterback position for the Chargers. Now, the biggest question mark, in my opinion, on this team, a lot of people are going to say wide receiver. For me, it's running back.
Yeah,
Austin Ekeler, RB2, fourth overall. Obviously, when he is on the field, he's one of the best players, especially for PPR. There's no question about it. However, a lot of people say injury struggles and point to that 2020 season in which he only played 10 games. However, the 2 seasons since, PPR running back 1 and 2. Is he a guy you think is idiot proof at 4 overall here, RB2? Are you maybe thinking a little more towards, injury history? How are you feeling over Austin Ekeler here?
So Austin Ekeler has done a lot of good for me, and he's done a lot of good for you. I know that. I know you're a big Austin Ekeler guy. He's won us championships. Austin Ekeler is going to be involved. He's one of the better playmakers in the NFL, whether that be rushing, receiving, anything. His receiving alone is probably worth a top 7 pick in the draft. I don't necessarily know that you're going to get him any lower than 4. If you have the 4 spot, I think your conversation is between Kelce and Ekeler. I could totally understand if you go either way. The thing with Ekeler is he gets the ball. He gets 30 touches a game. He's going to be involved. The injury history doesn't scare me because he's had injuries his whole career and he's still produced. Austin Ekeler is the guy to me. I don't want to say he's a better Matt Forte, but he's kind of that Matt Forte kind of player who is a little bit better than Matt Forte in fantasy football. I'm totally with Austin Ekeler. I think this charge, like, look what we saw with Tony Pollard and Zeke the last couple of years with Kellen Moore. Of course, it's not going to be the same thing, but running backs are used in this offense, and I don't know that there's necessarily a running back that's used more, maybe Christian McCaffrey, than Austin Ekeler. So in terms of volume and usage alone, I'm all for Austin Ekeler. At that number 4 overall pick this year, and of course, there's also an argument that I think is valid to take him number 1 as well.
Yeah, and I mean housekeeping stuff real quick. Zach said Rodgers going way later in last year, FYI, like 4 rounds later. So take that as you will, Randy. But I agree too, and I think the thing that's interesting about Eckler is he is so nice because all these receivers always get hurt,
Right.
or are always up and down. Obviously, Keenan Allen has been very good as of late, injury history except for last year, but I mean, he's been a stud. Mike Williams, we know what he is up and down. Josh Palmer, they just drafted. Um, Quentin Johnson,
Johnson.
he might have some problems getting open and injury history in the past as well. But I mean, he just kind of seems idiot proof to me in Eckler. I mean, any running back in the league, most running backs in the league, I would say, starting quarterback goes down or a big player goes down, they go down. If Easton Stick has to take over or whatever quarterback they want to throw in for Justin Herbert,
Max Duggan.
I mean, Max Duggan, it doesn't matter. I think Eckler's fine. They're going to give him check downs. The running lanes might not be there, but I mean, he's going to be one of their best receivers on the team. So with that in mind about Eckler, obviously high RB1. Joshua Kelly isn't really even getting drafted anywhere. He's pretty much the only backup. Isaiah Spiller is there as well. Is there any point for you in taking Spiller or Kelly as a handcuff here, or is it just wait and see if Eckler goes down?
You probably have to take one of them as a handcuff here, and I think this is more kind of see what the depth chart looks like after training camp. I'm all for taking a handcuff here. I think it's very smart to take a handcuff with these running backs like an Eckler or Saquon or even a Jonathan Taylor. To be honest, it's just smart. It's just smart. I think if you draft Eckler, you should probably look at taking Spiller or our other guy here. I forgot his name.
Joshua Kelly.
Joshua Kelly.
Yeah, for me, I mean, usually I'd say no, obviously, because I don't like handcuffs. I don't like losing the roster spot. But, as a guy who's going undrafted, can you probably go a week without kickers, especially depending on when you draft? Obviously, there are going to be some people that are drafting within the next 2 weeks here. I think you're insane, but I think it's great to have a handcuff, go without a kicker going into, the last few days before the regular season. So I think it's worthy, but outside of that, I mean, probably no ownership needed here from either of these guys.
Yep.
So moving on
Trevor,
to
I'm sorry. Before we move on, we have a user submitted question. Zachary in the chat, I'm asking for your opinion on this as well. A buddy of mine, Dynasty League, Superflex League. He's got Jalen Hurts starting as his regular quarterback. Right now, he's got Antonio Gibson starting as his Superflex, but he has Trey Lance and Brock Purdy on the bench. He also has Isaiah Spiller, and he's wondering if he should trade Isaiah Spiller for Sam Darnold to lock up that San Francisco quarterback room for his Superflex.
Boy, I don't see a point. I don't think losing Isaiah Spiller really hurts you at all. But I don't see a scenario in which Sam Darnold wins this job.
Yeah.
We've talked about it. Trey Lance never really even got a chance. His one chance was against the Bears in a monsoon when the field was a puddle. And Brock Purdy, I'm not sold on him, but it seems like him or Lance is going to get the job. I think if Darnold gets a job, you kind of got to live with it. So I don't think you do that trade.
Yeah. Yep. I agree with you, Zach, and it sounds like Zach's in agreement with us. Keep Isaiah Spiller if you're looking to trade him for Sam Darnold.
Fair enough. I mean, it's not great to have Isaiah Spiller on your bench either. but I guess Dynasty makes it a little more palatable.
Yep.
So moving on to the pass catchers not named Austin Ekeler in this offense. We'll go first to wide receiver. Obviously, Keenan Allen being drafted wide receiver 18. That is 38 overall. I mean, it doesn't really matter what I say about Keenan Allen. Anybody that knows fantasy football knows who he is, know how good he is. Even people that don't know fantasy football probably heard the name Keenan Allen from people that they know that do play fantasy football. Is there any thought to him here? Obviously, you want him. Would you rather have him? He's kind of by that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range. Um, are you thinking maybe you're leaning more wide receiver 3 with him, or are you perfectly fine with him at the 2?
So I would love if I could have Keenan Allen as my wide receiver 3 or even my flex. The guy is as big of a target monster as we've seen in the last couple of years. Apart from the injury last year, he's averaging, almost 75 yards a game on like 6, 7 targets. And right there, if you can get, 7 plus, 6, 13 points out of your flex or wide receiver 3, you're in a very, very, very good, very, very good position. We're big Keenan Allen guys. I don't think the addition of Quentin Johnson really affects his value at all because Keenan Allen has kind of carved out that role as that safety blanket for Justin Herbert. I still think on every single pass play, Keenan Allen needs to be the number one option and is probably the number one option. I'm a big Keenan Allen guy. I think, like I said before, I think the Chargers continue to pass the ball, and I think Keenan Allen is probably the biggest beneficiary of that, right?
Yeah, I think there's a chance here that maybe some people look at Quentin Johnston and say, I'm a little scared of him and the injury history and maybe back off on Keenan Allen. I think there's a chance you can get him as a 3 in certain leagues. And I mean, you look at his finishes, obviously he only played 2 weeks for the first, what is it, about 10, 11, 12 weeks of the season. But after that, finished wide receiver 19, 22, 10, 9, 19, 9, 25, and 1.
Yeah,
So clearly, to your point, when he's on the field, he produces, and that's something we've seen since what, 2017?
yeah, for a long time. Yep,
And
I'm in on Keenan Allen.
players around him, obviously, Keenan Allen, 38. 35, Kenneth Walker, Joe Burrow, Amari Cooper right ahead of him at 37.
Okay.
Then we have TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon. So closest wide receiver Cooper at 37. We've talked about him with Cleveland. Proved a lot of us wrong, at least me and Zach wrong in terms of playing outdoors. Let's say you have a chance between Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen here. Who are you taking with both of them having the same bye, pretty much the same age, pretty much identical in terms of everything you need to know about position rank and draft?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's really a toss up for me. Here's Zach in the chat; he's going 30th. If you get him at wide receiver 3, your running back suck, and that's why I know a lot of people who do no running back drafts. So I'd be ecstatic with that. Trevor, I'm gonna say I think it's tough, and like I said, I think it's a toss up. I think they probably finish around the same this year. I'll give it to Keenan Allen. I think he has. I don't know. I think he has a better quarterback, right? I think he has the more proven quarterback, the one that you can probably rely on a little bit more. Mari Cooper has, is probably more of a focal point of the offense. I think the Chargers offense is just better in general than the Browns offense. They like to run the ball a lot. So put a gun to my head. I think they finish probably pretty close to the same, but if you had to make a pick, Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I'm probably going Keenan Allen. I think the tiebreaker for me is, I mean, it's going to sound stupid. The weather in the AFC North, I mean, that's insane. I mean, kickers have a tough time enough in Pittsburgh, and this is throwing the ball 50 yards downfield sometimes. Obviously, defenses, I think, are better over there as well. And to Zach's point, hey, we're covering the bases for guys in 8, 6, and 4-team fantasy football leagues. I question your sanity if you're in a 4-team fantasy football league, but, we got you covered anyways.
Sometimes 14 fantasy leagues are lit when all the teams are just stacked.
They get wild.
Yeah.
So wide receiver 2 there is obviously Mike Williams. He's being drafted a little later, but not too much. He's being drafted wide receiver 26. That is 57th overall. Players around Mike Williams currently at that ADP. Drake London at 55, Christian Watson 56, Christian Kirk at 58, Miles Sanders 59, Calvin Ridley 60. So a lot of wide receivers bunched in there. We'll talk about his fit in his offense later. But in that bunch is Mike Williams the guy to own now that we've talked about everybody in that bunch?
I don't know that he is. I mean, it kind of feels like we know what Mike Williams is now, right? The last couple of off seasons been like, oh, is Mike Williams, a DeAndre Hopkins, or is he like a James Jones? It kind of feels like he's a little in between, right? He's not a great route runner. He's not great at separating, but in terms of jump balls, he can go and get them. We know that Justin Herbert isn't afraid to throw jump balls. His injury concerns I don't want to say really concern me, but I mean, Mike Williams to me is just very inconsistent player. He's going to have great weeks. He's going to have horrible weeks. I think the addition of Quentin Johnson hurts him more than it hurts anyone else in this offense. I don't love Mike Williams this year. I think I'm off of the Mike Williams could be the guy train, and I'm more on the train of if he's there, I'll take him. Otherwise, I'm not going to take him if I have to reach for him or if there's whatever. I think I like Calvin Ridley a little bit better than Mike Williams. I do think that Kellen Moore does play that little more fast paced offense. I think that may help Mike Williams out a little bit more. But once again, I don't know. I think Quentin Johnson is right there to kind of supplement that a little bit. I don't necessarily know that Mike Williams has the best season of his career this year. I don't know that we see anything better than Mike Williams has ever been. For what it's worth, Zach saying Kellen Moore offense should benefit the X, so it depends if Mike Williams stays healthy, and I don't totally disagree with you. It's really hard for me to really trust Mike Williams' consistency. It's really hard for me to trust him staying on the field. I think I like some of those other guys a little bit more, and I mentioned Calvin Ridley there.
Yeah, for me, I'm on board with you too. Take out 2021. Now you can take out anybody's season and manipulate the stats how you want, but take out 2021 as PPR finishes 32, 46, 39, and 32 outside of his rookie season. I don't see anything that tells me he should be drafted higher than 32, really. I mean, he's only passed that once. On top of that, obviously it should benefit him, but like Zach also said, it's going to be an inefficient passing offense. And guess what? We know Keenan Allen is going to get his. We know Austin Ekeler is going to get his in terms of targets. So who's kind of the odd man out if it's inefficient? Who's going to be the boomer bust guy? In my opinion, Mike Williams. Now, that might not be agreed with. That might not be how it plays out. But I mean, we know Johnson isn't going to dig into certain guys' targets and production. So I'm not a huge Mike Williams guy either. With that being said, where is the highest you take him in terms of position on your team? Wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. Where are you where's a place where you'd say, all right, I'll take him here?
Well, I think you can get by with him being your wide receiver 2. I don't think that that's a championship team at all. I would much rather have him as a flex. I would much rather have him as a wide receiver 3 if you have 3 wide receivers on your team. So kind of around that flex wide receiver 3 range for me.
Yeah, obviously outside of super flex, I'd agree with you. And he's just not a wide receiver 3 or 2 you like to see, really.
Right.
It's going to be high or low.
Yep, I'm with you.
So next wide receiver we have on this team, obviously drafted out of TCU, a guy that was mocked to Green Bay in a decent amount of mocks. Quentin Johnston, wide receiver 47, overall draft position 108. Guys around there, that position, Rashad Penny 106, Samaje Perine 107, Daniel Jones 109, Juju at 110, Dalton Schultz 111. So before we get into those comparisons, we talked a little bit about him in the offense with Mike Williams. There is fantasy relevance here. I think most people would say, how much do you think could be here?
So the thing about Quentin Johnston, right, is I think, Kellen Moore, as we've seen at Dallas, he loves those three receiver sets. It's just that it's so fast paced, and Justin Herbert likes to take those shots. But I think the Chargers are at their best when they're hitting underneath stuff, mid to low receivers, tight ends, whatever that means. Especially with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Austin Ekeler on this team, it's really hard for me to imagine that Quentin Johnston gets more than 7 to 8 targets a game. I think he's a fine player. Cool, whatever you think about him, he's probably a good football player. I just don't necessarily know that he's going to be that fantasy relevant in this offense. Of course, if there's an injury to Allen and Williams, which is probably, I don't want to say it's likely, but it's happened in the past, then I think Quentin Johnston's value shoots way out of the room. I think I don't want to say he's worth a draft pick, but I definitely don't think he's a reach. But I do think there's going to be people that pass on him. If you can get him a round later than you're going, or maybe around 2 rounds later than he's going, I think it might be worth a risk reward kind of pick here.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting place for sure where he's going. Obviously, Michael Thomas at 105, we've talked glowingly about him with, I mean, just how low 105 is. You look at him 108. Obviously, Juju Smith-Schuster was great last year, but that was Kansas City. 112, Jameson Williams, he's suspended. Obviously, you got Odell Beckham 115. That's Baltimore. Who knows what we see there. So, if Allen and Mike Williams are healthy, you really probably don't lose out on a whole lot of production. To your point, if they're hurt, I mean, is this a guy that you think can be our wide receiver 2 this year?
Absolutely, I think he can. I think the role is there for him, and he, other than JSN, I think he's probably the one of the better, probably a top 2, top 3 receiver coming out of the draft. I think there's a reason San Diego. There's a reason Los Angeles drafted him, and I think right now he's just profiling as a wide receiver 3. But Keenan Allen goes down, that can easily shoot up to I'll say a wide receiver 2, maybe even a wide receiver 1.5.
Agree. Next one, I mean, we have to talk about him. I feel like people talk about him every year. To his credit, finished wide receiver 38 last year at a third overall finish in week 11. Good for him. But currently going at wide receiver 82, 215 overall. I mean, obviously, as we've said, that's pretty much undrafted, charted territory. Anytime you're just ahead of the Miami Dolphins and the Los Angeles Rams and a kicker, probably means you're not going anywhere special. Is he, I mean, with Quentin Johnston as an addition,
You're
is his
talking
role basically sucked up?
who you're talking about? Josh Palmer?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know that it's sucked up. I think Josh Palmer is actually a pretty good receiver. He played big time in the playoffs. He's played big times down the stretch. It seems like Justin Herbert has somewhat of a connection with them. Of course, if an injury goes down, if an injury happens, I want Josh Palmer. He's shown that he can produce in the absence of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Josh Palmer is kind of an under the radar kind of guy for me who can give you, a spot start if needed. I'm not going into a week saying, yes, Josh Palmer is going to be my flex or Josh Palmer is going to be my wide receiver 3 or anything. But I think he's certainly worth the draft pick as much as Quentin Johnston's worth the draft pick.
And it's interesting, too, looking at his weekly finishes. There's really no thread here, no variance, I mean, between whether Williams is out or Allen is out. I mean, it's not like if Allen's out, he's incredible. If Williams is out, he's nothing. It's kind of back and forth. Ironically, his best week was with Williams and Allen there. So I guess, do you think he's worth more with Allen and Williams there, where he can kind of be a tricky little decoy behind the back? Or is he a guy that you think needs an injury to have some success this year?
Yeah, probably more to the second point there. Here's Zach in the chat. Palmer would probably play slot if Keenan Allen gets hurt, not Johnson, which makes total sense. And really that's probably where a lot of his value comes from. It's tough for Josh Palmer with them drafting Quentin Johnston. But he's a guy where I think he should be rostered. I think, and if that means he's drafted with the last pick for someone, I think it's worth a pick. I think this offense, this passing game is just too strong to not have him on a roster. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not a fan of Josh Palmer. I'm really not a fan of any Chargers outside of Eckler and Allen in terms of fantasy. But I mean, clearly there's something there. If he's still on the team and they obviously like him, they'll get him the ball weeks to week. So certainly can do worse, and not too much harm at an undrafted spot that he's going at right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Zach, you're our tiebreaker. Give us your thoughts. Is Josh Palmer someone that you're going to draft or whatever? Go along with the question that Trevor had asked earlier. All right, Trevor, I'm ready.
so a guy that another pass catcher. I mean, dare I say, went out the gates hot last year. Finished tight end 4 in week 1, tight end 8 in week 2. Stumbled a little bit, tight end 33 in week 3, but then again, tight end 5 in week 4. Gerald Everett finished as tight end number 12. Is currently going at tight end number 18, 161 overall. He was top 12 7 times last year. Is this a guy to you that is a sneaky tight end play? Was that a result of the injuries? Is this something to kind of monitor with another receiver in the mix? How are you looking at Everett in a bad tight end landscape, if I may say?
Yeah, and I was a Gerald Everett guy last year. I think that's probably the result of a Keenan Allen injury, a result of a Mike Williams injury, a result of a Justin Herbert injury, who maybe is not taking as many shots as usual. I don't love Gerald Everett this year. I think he's a guy where if all the tight ends get scooped up and you kind of draft no tight ends and you need to pick one up, I think he's fine. I don't think that he's ever going to win you a week. I don't think he's ever going to win you a championship, but I don't think he's ever going to lose you a week or lose you a championship. I think he's kind of a mainstay, maybe 5 to 8 points weekly, and if you had a touchdown on that, that goes up to 13 a week. And maybe 7 is probably too much for him. Probably like 3, maybe like a 4 to a 6 point guy a week. And just showing where the tight end landscape is, you can do much worse than that at the tight end position. To be honest, I don't love Gerald Everett. He's not a guy that I'm looking to draft. He's not a guy that I think has a monumental role in this offense. To me, he's probably the fifth option on this offense on passing plays on any given play. I don't think you should be drafting Gerald Everett and expecting him to produce tight end 1 through 8 points on a weekly basis. Can you win with the tight end 9 on your team? Absolutely. And if that's the case, I'm sure you're stacked at other positions. And if that's the case, more power to you. But if you want production out of your tight end, I think you need to look somewhere else than Gerald Everett.
And one of the guys that complicates it a little bit, looked decent enough in the playoff and their wild card win against Jacksonville. Donald Parham, he's a tight end there. Didn't play a lot of games, some due to injury. Even when he didn't play a lot of snaps, but he did play a little bit of a role. He is also a tight end, not being drafted, not in the ADP. Do you think he's a guy? Obviously, if he's healthy, we assume he's going to have a role in this offense. They've kept him around this long for a reason. Obviously, tight end too. They like him on play action, deep routes. Is he anybody worth of consideration here?
I don't necessarily know that he is, and Zach, you can speak on this more than I can. He's a big body. He could probably block fine and everything. I just don't know that he's used enough to justify even keeping a bench spot on him. At times I think it could be like one target every 3 weeks, and that's just something that you do not need on your team.
I'm in the same boat. I don't think he gets you anything. I don't even know if you can trust him. If Everett goes down, they have Trey McKitty. They used him too. I'm not saying Trey McKitty's going to steal shit from anybody, but he's definitely somebody that you have to think about. So before we get into kind of um, the sleeper best value stuff like that, it is worth monitoring, and we talked about him a little bit, the Mike Williams conversation. Essentially on a contract year this year, probably going to be cut or extended due to him having a base salary of 17 million next year. Cap hit next year is going to be 32 million. with 12 million of dead cap. Um, if he gets cut, let's say he gets cut, are there is him leaving the Chargers, is that better for him or worse for his fantasy impact?
Of course, it all depends where he goes, right? I think if he goes to a team like maybe like I don't know, when Kyler Murray's back, like in Arizona, something like that, I think his value kind of shoots up a little bit. But if he ends up on a team like a Buffalo or something, I don't necessarily know that I think actually it probably goes down. I think Mike Williams is very properly rated where he's at. He at best he's probably a number two option, number two receiving option on teams. And I don't, and I like I said before, I think we've seen, I think we've seen everything that Mike Williams has to offer, and at times it looks incredible, at times it looks really shitty. I think Mike Williams really only becomes wide receiver one, really high end wide receiver two value if he's force fed, being an only receiver on the team. So if you're asking me that, I'm saying if he goes to a bad team, great, and he's the only receiver option, I'm all for it. If not, then I think I'm staying away from him.
Yeah, and to Zach's point in the comments, we are talking about dynasty a little bit, just because
Sorry.
his dead cap this year is 26 million. Um, don't really see a reason that would make any sort of sense to take his dead cap and not use him. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, if they restructure him, um, or re-sign him or extend him or whatever they want to call it, could
And
be interesting. I guess see what the team thinks of him, but
yep,
we'll see. It would benefit him a lot to stay healthy,
yep.
but we'll certainly see.
And to our discussion before about Donald Parham, Zach's in the chat here. If you're listening, go to YouTube, watch it, subscribe, like the video. We appreciate everyone watching. We appreciate everyone engaging with us. It helps us a lot. But Zach's saying Donald Parham's role is more of a blocker, so no need for fantasy purposes unless Gerald Everett gets hurt. And that's kind of the boat that we were on here.
So as we did with Kansas City, you have one best value on the Chargers, probably between Allen, Ekeler, and Herbert. Who are you picking here?
Um, my gut wants me to say Justin Herbert, just because he's probably going to be right a top six scorer in fantasy football this year, and you can get him in the 6th, 7th round. But in regards to value and positional differences, I'll say Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I'll agree with you too. I mean, I think people could make a case even about Eckler. I think it's.
Sure.
I mean, even I fall victim to his injury prone type thing. I mean, he's been on the field the last 3 years,
Yeah,
so that's certainly something to be
there's
said for
certainly
him.
an argument that if you can get Austin Eckler not at the number one pick, it's good value.
Absolutely. And sleeper on this team, I'm assuming you're between Mike Williams or Quentin Johnston here.
Yeah, probably Quentin Johnson. I'll even throw in Josh Palmer, but it's probably Quentin Johnson. I made my point pretty clear that I've seen Mike Williams. I know what he is. I know what he's going to get you. Quentin Johnson. I'll say Quentin Johnson just for the mystery, just for the unknowingness behind it.
Yeah, I'm going to say him too. I mean, guys drafted right after Mike Williams, Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley, Michael Pittman Jr., Deontay Johnson. I think that's a heck of a lot of that's a much bigger risk you're taking than Quentin Johnston at 108 over Juju with suspended Jamison William and Odell.
Yep, agree 100%.
So, with that all in mind, obviously that is two of the teams in the AFC West. I guess the last question, partially fantasy related, partially not. How do you think these offenses are going to shake out in the AFC West race this year?
I believe that these are two of the better offenses in the NFL, and I think I'm a big proponent of star power. Of course, coaching is a huge thing, but I think you need to have stars on your team to be well. Both of these teams have unbelievable stars in Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen. Like they're superstars on these offenses. When it all comes down to it at the end of the year, when we're looking at total yardage, I would imagine both of these offenses are within the top 10 of total yardage this year.
And for a super niche question here, there are some fantasy leagues that have team fantasy leagues. You pick a team.
Yep.
Are you taking Kansas City or are you taking the Chargers?
That's a really good question, right? It's probably, I don't know, probably the Chargers, right? It feels like I said before, it feels like they have more fantasy relevant players on their team. Feels like more guys are going to be involved. Where I don't necessarily know that anyone on the Chargers gets 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns like Kelce. But I don't necessarily know that anyone on Kansas City outside of Kelce has 1,000 yards. And I think both Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and maybe even Quentin Johnson have an opportunity to get 1,000 yards. And of course, Austin Ekeler is probably going to get 1,000 yards rushing. I don't think Kansas City can say the same.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I think you look at that LA offense. I think you can make an argument for having a quarterback one, RB1, and an RB1.
Yep.
With Kansas City, as much as I love Kelce and Mahomes, like you said, running back's a big question mark. Wide receiver's a big question mark too. So it's a little top heavy.
Let me ask you this, Trevor. Is there anyone on either of these teams that you are certain that I am getting him? I want him on my team this year.
I mean, not really. I mean, I think it all kind of depends how it falls. Like, in leagues with, people don't like tight ends. They
Right.
love Travis Kelce. They don't like tight ends. I'm not high on taking tight ends early, but I mean, you've kind of sold me, and the stats have sold me. If Travis Kelce is there end of the first round, I'm taking him,
Yeah.
and I think I'm as sold as I can get on that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think like if Travis Kelce is there, if he's at the top of your board, I think draft him.
Well, with that being said, Luke, you have any fun facts, fun dentistry facts, fun theoretical questions?
Well,
Make us think.
I'm trying to think of has anything happened in the past week that would be fun to talk about? And honestly, I don't think so. I'm sorry to the audience. The big part of my last week was buying that pint of bubblegum ice cream. But other than that, nothing really. I'll throw a plug in if you're in Green Bay, and I think we have a lot of Green Bay, probably Packer fan listeners considering Lombardi sweep. Check out Happy Joe's Pizzeria in Green Bay. Incredible taco pizza. That's all I got.
Last question before we plug it. Favorite summer food? I'm going with brats. I think anything on the grill should suffice.
Yep, I really only try to eat hot dogs in the summer and brats, and I'm with that. Watermelon, of course, it always plays in the summer. Any kind of barbecue always plays. I think macaroni salad always plays. But I'll give you a beer. This summer all I'm drinking is Corona Extra with a lime. That to me is the number one summer beer. And Randy, I would be excited to hear your summer food. If we don't get to it today, let us know tomorrow.
Actually, instead, Randy, tell us how hot do your summers get
Yep.
next time? Drop in the chat how hot do your summers get. Let us know. But with that being said, as we said, check out Lombardi Sweep every place you listen to podcasts.
Give us a degree, Randy, when you say how hot it is. All right, sorry.
Yeah. Be on the lookout for some fantasy football stuff that we're putting out with this
We got
podcast.
we
Be
got
on
a
the
lot of
lookout
content coming.
on Zach's Twitter. Some fantasy stuff that we may be changing the game. And by maybe, I mean it's just a matter of when, not if. Check out Playing Catch Up Podcast. I Don't Think So Podcast. Flurry Sports Podcast. All that good stuff. Rate us 5 stars. Share us with your mom, your grandma, and your sister.
And as always, we're here to help you with fantasy football. Let us know what you want in a fantasy football draft kit. We will be starting to include it.
Absolutely. And if you don't tell us, we can't get it to you. But if you do, it'll probably be in there.
Yep.
So take care. We will be back tomorrow with the Denver Broncos and the Las Vegas Raiders.
Ooh.
See ya.
Peace.